This project will take 2 to 4 weeks for you to complete, and you shouldn't rush the process because the longer you take, the longer that you wait, the better your dog or your other four-legged creature will come out. So please take your time, enjoy the process, and here we go. You're going to want a drawing of your dog to stay on track with your proportions, and you will also want a drawing of the torso of your dog to scale to reference back to, with a line drawn at the widest point of your torso. This line will help you reference back to your wear board and check that your shape and your size of your torso is to scale. You can also use a paddle if you want, a sharp tool, and a container that will fit your lima bean body of a dog with some paper towels. You will also need a sponge or some other block to hold your body up as you start building, and of course your wear board that you are being provided. You can also use another small wear board and a Lazy Susan, also known as a banding wheel, if you have one to bring to the studio. So first I'm going to start off making a circle with the coil in the diameter that I want the base of my little conical shape to be. The paper that I drew out with the dimensions is for me to hold up and compare to the coil form that I am building to make sure that I stay on track and actually build the shape that I need. As you can see, it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to take a little slice out and reattach it to itself, and now it looks a lot better and closer to form. Don't be afraid to cut into your body a few times more if you need to keep that original shape that you're going for. Sometimes it's hard with the coils to build inward rather than outward, and that's okay. It just takes a lot of practice and a lot of smoothing. For any of my coils that are not already moist, I am scratching and attaching, but otherwise, if all of your clay is the same wetness, you can just smooth in the inside and the outside. There is no correct form for the body of your dog, but typically they expand from wider at the chest to narrow at the waist and then round again at the rump. Now that I have most of my body done and it is hollowed all the way out, I am going to grab my container that fits around the bottom of the body and fill it with paper towels. The paper towels are just for padding, and you can tuck some more into the sides if your bucket or your container is a little too big for your form. Now I'm going to re-moisten the top and add some score marks and start adding more coils to make the broader chest part of my body. As I keep building, I'm going to be tucking it inward more and more and more to ultimately close it in at the top. When I'm done filling in my form, I can use my small paddle, if I'd like, to make sure that the form is more unified and round at the base than lopsided, which can often happen. Next, I'm going to take a small block that I've decided is the height of the legs that I want for my little corgi shape, and I'm going to get 2 more pieces of clay and place them on either side in coil form to make a little bit of a cradle for my piece. I will also put paper towels on top of it so that my clay doesn't stick, take it out of its container, and place it on top in a delicate balance. And now I'm going to add the holes for the legs. Legs of dogs do not actually start under the body, but rather halfway up the body at this point right here. So that's where I'm going to make my holes on either side of my form all the way around for the 4 legs. Now that I've done that, I'm going to start coiling legs. So I'm going to start with going all the way around the holes on every side, and a very important part of this process is working through all the legs all at once rather than building only one leg at a time. And here I am building out the elbows, so to speak, of my dog and checking all the way around to make sure that all the legs are even and not flaring more on one side than the other. It's really important to work in the round when you're doing legs because you don't want one to dry sooner than the other or be in a different shape than the others. As you coil all the way down to the bottom, you want to make sure that the leg is completely hollow or otherwise stab a hole through the bottom of the paw later on. And really, the proportions of this dog are specific to the dog I have in mind, that is a very short, stout, and long breed. So your legs may be a different length. You can opt out of using realistic type legs by making them simply conical. It's really important as you go along through these steps to allow your clay time to dry a little bit and become leather hard and settle. Otherwise, if you're building with wet clay, everything will start collapsing as you go, and you definitely don't want that. Now that the legs are fully formed and leather hard and can hold their own weight, I've taken the sculpture off of the blocks and I'm going to start cutting out a neck area for the head. And I am applying a stitch pattern around the base of my neck to make sure that it's firmly attached. I like to stitch my coils into place sometimes by dragging clay from the coil outward into the rest of the body so that all the clay from the coil is literally mixed and pulled into the rest of the body and then smooth it back out. Now I've covered most of the body because it started drying out a little bit faster than I wanted it to, and I'm continuing to work towards the head. This part starts feeling a little bit more tricky as you want your neck to be stable enough to handle weight extending out past its base. And there is no rule saying that you have to add a full coil all the way around as you build. If you need to add only some coils in some areas to even everything out, that's fine too, as I'm doing here. Now looking from the front, you can see that one side is leaning over slightly more, so I'm just going to keep tucking it in and looking at it from all angles to ensure that the head does not end up lopsided. Now I'm taking the plastic off, and I'm going to add some slightly moistened paper towels. You can use the same paper towels that you used earlier, and you don't want the towels to be soaking wet. You just want to make sure that the legs are not drying out faster than the rest of the body by doing this. Now we're going to cut out a hole for the tail, and really the point of having all of these hollow exit areas is to keep the drying more thorough within the piece rather than all the air coming out in one direction. And now I've crafted a tail. It is going to be a flared open tail that hangs over the opening, and I have finished creating more of my head. Now I'm going to tuck in a little bit of the back of the cranium because it's sticking out a little bit too much for me, so I just take a triangle out of the full form, tuck it inward, and the head is looking a little more how I want it to be. Now I'm making an ear, also open form, and I'm just measuring it up to the dog head to see and make sure that it's as exaggerated as I want it to be. Now I'm adding a disc of clay to the top with my fingers inside as support and smoothing it onto the rest of the head. You want to make sure that the head is stiff enough to hold up to this kind of force, and I will finish off the snout in the same way by adding that last little chunk of clay to make the snout. Now adding the ears onto the body with some classic scratch and attach. Adding coils to the inside of your ears is very helpful to keeping them firmly attached, especially if you have a seam line in there. So I like to just make little mini coils, dip them slightly in water, and then tuck them in with a wooden tool, if you so choose. Next come the eyeballs. For the eyeballs, I make a sphere that looks about the right proportions and cut that thing in half. You do not have to go through what traditional sculptors will tell you to do, where you kind of press into the clay to make a little cavern, unless you really want to and add that whole sphere. I prefer to just add half a sphere directly to that surface and build eyelids on top of it. And eyelids are really just little coils that are pinched on the ends, as you'll see here, little crescent moons. Make sure that you firmly scratch and attach, slip and score, and smooth it in with your fingers or with the tool. Remember that it is up to you to bring your individual tools that you'd like to use for this project to the studio, so make sure and bring an excess of materials if you think you may need extra propping or extra tools for your dog. Make sure that your eyelids are prominent enough against the eyeball so that you can tell that they are there. And if you've watched Vanessa's video on making poofy slip, you can add that onto your dog body for additional texture. Admittedly, I did not wait long enough to start adding my poofy slip, so it is a little bit wet, kind of like icing on a hot cake. But past the time of recording, I added on more poofy slip after it had dried more and added more fur texture. I recommend adding texture with the slip rather than bothering yourself with adding texture directly to the body, because you don't want to overwork your clay after you've just put it through so much in such a long process. So here's the dog, fresh out of the kiln. Depending on the clay that you use, if it's high fire, you can use any kind of glaze you'd want. I would highly recommend using a glaze that allows you to see that texture if it's important for you to be able to tell that it has fur. I personally chose to go with mason stains. I used Rio, black mason stain, and Rutile, all which are available here in the studio, but of which you need to ask staff to access so they can bring it out to you and properly sanitize each jar. And I really focused on using a lot of Rio for the base color and leaving the bisqueware to act as the white in the dog's fur. I used very small brush with controlled strokes to use the mason stains to get that detail in the eyebrow, in the nose, and if you look closely you can see that I kind of moved just some wet water with my brush into the mason stains and spread it outward to give it a more distressed look. Here in the scruff you can see that that porcelain slip really added more texture in, and I put some little dots of Rutile along with the Rio to add some dimension as well. Along the back I have a black stripe going down the back, and you can't really see it yet before it's fired, but there's a lot of layering going on with the Rutile and Rio in the haunches, on the back, and throughout the whole body. So let's see how it looks when it comes post-fire. As you can see, the Rutile and the Rio together merged and made a very beautiful layered effect on the fur in the back, and I recommend getting this effect by laying down layers of each in watery and thick swatches throughout the body. This gives it a very painterly effect, and having that texture laid down by the porcelain slip really helps bring out that lifelike character in this dog, in your pup, and whatever else you might want to make that stands on 4 legs. So go forth, create, and enjoy your day.